Here we are, bottom of the Smash Mountain. Today I'm so pleased to be joined by none other than Pipsqueak, who is one of the hottest EU-based players in the entire Europe. I was going to say world. Boy, I'm off to a great start today. I'm so happy to have you on, Pip. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here. I reached out to you, so that shows that, I was interested in doing this, because my ego from winning tournaments, that's not enough. I also need to, jump on different podcasts and, just say stuff, hear my own voice a little bit.
It's a great thing. For me, I get to go through it every time I record, but I want to actually just take a moment for myself selfishly here and appreciate the kind of glow up process where I had asked you onto the podcast a while ago and you said no, which is very fair for you to say no, by the way, because I was like more towards the beginning. And so now at this moment in time, very thankful to have you on, because I think it just shows both of us like improving what we're doing, on my part especially, but for you also.
You're right.
For you also, because you didn't have to come on, but you still decided that you wanted to come on to the podcast, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was super. I remember, I think I gave a reason why I said no. I think I had like a really busy time. So no, I've been jealous of all my friends who've been on this podcast. So every time I've seen a friend on this podcast, I'm like, why haven't they asked me? Why haven't I been asked yet? And then I've completely blanked the fact that you have asked me before. And this is actually the first time I'm hearing of the fact that I actually said no. I've just been operating on the assumption that I just never got asked, and I'm like, dang. Oh, I see how it is.
It's okay. I don't want to make it a he said thing. Yes, you did give me a good reason for saying no, but usually when I hear that, I go, well, I'm not going to ask next week, nor am I going to ask next month. I have to play the long game because I intend on doing this for a while. So hopefully that's also something that people like yourself will appreciate, because you probably get people coming up to you sometimes and they're like, yo, Pipsqueak, words and things, can we do stuff? And then you say no, yes. And they try to be cool, but then they'll come back a week later as if everything's changed and you're ready to go now.
No, that's very common, but I always feel a little bit of like, I always start like blushing emotionally after a while, because I'm like, dang. You gave me a week and that was all you could do? Oh man, you must really want my time. Okay. And then we usually go from there, but no, it does happen. So I appreciate it. It's just been, sometimes we find the golden spots like here where it's right before Summit and right after a big tournament. So it feels kind of nice to, have a discussion right before like a big event. It's actually 2 events since I'm going to Smash World Tour as well. And yeah, you caught me at a perfect timing. I remember what happened was you made a tweet, or you made a reply to me rather. Yes. And we're like, hey, I don't remember who asked first. Did I ask first or did you ask first?
I think so. Kamar, who is a mutual of ours, German-based player, was replying to a tweet that I made about Nikki being on the podcast, so was saying something about I've been on the podcast, and so I just Kamar saying that something to that effect. So I was like, Pipsqueak on the podcast when? Because I was like, I need to go for a bit of like a meme kind of a thing.
Yeah, you can't ask straight up. You have to actually like set it up properly. I respect that. However, I do find it funny that I completely forgot you asked before. You actually waited so long that my entire like long-term memory managed to fade away. It wasn't even my short-term memory, because I can't even recall it right now, even though we're talking about it.
It was all the way back in February. I went and checked. After you said yes, I was like, oh, finally. How long has it been since I asked the first time? And I was like, February. Okay. That's a while.
Yeah, that's really funny. But well, let's just retroactively change that backstory and say that you never asked and this interaction on Twitter never happened. It was just that I saw Nicky on the podcast and I said, anything he can do, I can do better. And, then I jumped on here. Yeah.
I love that. And even though you're very good teammates together when you play doubles, you still have this competition between the two of you that I think is awesome to see. Even at the same circuit finale, and this is one of the reasons why talking to you is so cool, because right now you're the only Melee player that is on automatic in for both Summit 12 and Summit 13. You were not because you won the same circuit finale, which is unfortunate, but just that in that bracket, you and Nikki had to play against each other was in losers, and it's like, oh, that's so unfortunate. Yeah. But you're not thinking, maybe this, that. No, you're playing to win, and Nikki feels the same way. It's really cool to see that.
Yeah, I've always had the attitude in general that I like results are really, really cool, but they aren't like they're not a goal that you can set and work towards because it's so nebulous and it doesn't inform anything about like what you actually have to change, what you have to do. You just kind of do stuff and say, okay, I want to win this event, and then that doesn't mean anything. But one thing I do think is really cool is when you can like focus on the game and you can try to push each other to like play better. And it's one of those things where I've had people come up to me and apologize for warming up my opponents. And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? I want the best melee possible. Like if Nikki warms up like 7 German players in a row and just like hands them over to me and they go through the meat grinder. And I'm like, thank you. That was higher quality than I would have gotten without your warm up. And in the same way, when we play each other, it's not about like, oh, who deserves to move forward, or like, one of us has worked harder or less hard or whatever, who's more deserving. It's all about just like trying to push each other and play better and become better at the game.
I just realized I mixed up the same circuit finale and the Smash World Tour. The Smash World Tour is where you both played in losers. You ended up winning that.
He never entered the same finals.
Right,
I just realized finals. Right as he said it.
So disappointing that he wasn't able to play in the same circuit, but you had a nice little run there in losers. Very nice little run there. Not a big deal. Beating just about everybody to place first and get an invite to Summit 13 must feel pretty good.
Well, I'll just quote the people in my chat and in my Twitter replies constantly, which is common Pip W. And I don't know why, who started it, but now every time I just need an ego boost, I swear it's almost on demand. Something good happens, and I'm like, dang. And it's common Pip W. I'm like, oh, thank you. But no, I actually, if anything, I just, I want to thank Radar for that win. In that Radar went and answered one of my tweets, which was I got a migraine and my eyes started hurting and I was super tired immediately after losing. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna win this. Then he said, have you tried an absolute mountain of caffeine when a migraine is coming on? I swear it helps. And I was like, I have nothing to lose. And then I took a ton of caffeine and then I stayed awake as a byproduct. My migraine went away, my eye pain went away, and I just kind of like sat there and won game after game after game. It was a good time. So yeah, that's entirely his fault that I, stole the second invite and that, EU can't have anything. It's all mine.
There was a lot of cool moments leading up to you being able to win that tournament, and I could sort of sense that after winning a few sets in losers, it was just like Pipsqueak's not going anywhere. So like that's what I really like about your play style, is that you embrace momentum, it would seem to me, about just as well as any other player, when you especially like you just get a few good wins in and then that gives you like a real confidence boost. So aside from the caffeine, I felt like as you won more and more leading up to grand finals, it was just like that's what it was to you, that you were also building momentum.
I don't really feel like I did that. I feel like, if anything, I played horrendously at the start, and I sort of went back to how I normally play. Like throughout the net play events, most of them, and HF LAN, which I was at last weekend, was sort of the same thing. Normally, I feel like I have a very consistent standard, and what happened was sort of just that there hasn't been solo battle hasn't entered a lot So solo battle, there hasn't been a reason to play versus Puff specifically, and then you sort of forget what you have to do. And what happened was sort of like I forgot what I had to do. I play solo battle, I lose because solo battle is a very good player, and then I sort of just I had one thought, which was that it's going to be really frustrating slash hard to beat Triff in grand finals twice from losers. And then I saw Professor Pro beat Triff, and I was like, okay, if I beat Triff, this is extremely doable. And then from there, it was sort of like I just kept up the same level of play throughout. And I mean, I don't really feel like it was momentum as much as just like I was so tired, and then when I stopped being tired, I just like played up to standard.
You just had to get off of the whatever reverse momentum is. You just had to get back to neutral again. That's what you would say is more accurate.
Yes, and it's interesting because I think that my playstyle, it's like the least momentum-based playstyle imaginable, in that in a lot of ways I've aped after like Wizrobe and the 20GX Falcons, and I just apply a similar sort of playstyle to Fox. And in this, you're not gonna see Wizrobe suddenly like play 5 times better because he got a good like read on the opponent. That's not how that playstyle works. And in the same way, it's kind of fascinating that you say momentum, because I feel like it was very much just like I remember being very frustrated in winners that I was dropping stuff, and then in losers I was like, okay, now I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then in general, it was sort of like a one-time thing. And SWT, like every tournament I've been to, the Smash World Tour qualifier and HFLAN, it's sort of just like I keep a very consistent standard there. So yeah, I like a generous interpretation that I'm a momentum-based player because I went from losing to winning, and that makes me very happy that you say that, because now I've truly, I've got the full 360 of how you have like described play styles. I'm the cold and calculated one, I'm the momentum-based one. Like at this point, I have the whole world in my hands.
That's a beautiful thing. But maybe perhaps just to qualify my knowledge of Melee, I'm not even like a ranked player in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, not exactly a powerhouse of Melee. So you could take my my observation of you from a distance as you will, but I think a really good way to sort of spin it into a final a final description of how you played for the same circuit specifically is that it wasn't so much of you like gathering momentum, it was just continuing to find your way back to that neutral spot where you needed to be, instead of letting your tiredness, the migraine stuff and all that. So shout outs to Radar. Absolutely. I still remember the interview that you and Radar had on his YouTube channel where you guys got into a lot of cool stuff. So for anyone who wants to hear Pipsqueak talk more, you can go back to that Radar SSBM on YouTube, find that interview. I remember when that came out, and it had a lot of great perspectives. So I won't rehash all of that. We have a lot of current stuff to talk about. You alluded to HF LAN. I would love to get your perspective on how that event was, both as like, oh, hey, everybody's back together again, and also, okay, I should go back from there. Was that the first really, really big EU tournament where everybody's together? Because I feel like there was something in the Netherlands a month ago or so that Nikki was talking about.
Well, there was something Nikki was talking about, but it was much more of a like German/Netherlands event. It's Project Hive, I think it is, which I don't remember what it stands for, but it runs every like 2 months or something like that, like 3 months, and it's always pretty big, but no one from like outside those 2 countries kind of travels there. So it wasn't like a major EU major, while HFLAN was much more of a like everyone is here. Except for the fact that some very like I would consider key top 10 players had to DQ for various reasons. Triff DQ'd, Raiden DQ'd, and Nikki couldn't go despite being signed up at the start. But it was still like a major, because if you count like attendance, because it's pretty rare to reach like the 200 plus in EU.
Right, it's one of those tricky things where there's a ton of people that would say major, but then you're missing out a few of the top players for various reasons. So it's like it's harder to say major, but maybe perhaps would you have called it an EU super major if all the
No.
top player representation, or what's an EU
Oh,
super major to you? Can you even say
like
that?
I don't think you can say that. I think you can just call it EU majors. I think the like super major definition. I think the only thing we've had is Air 5, I believe, which had like 600, 700 entrants and everyone there. But I don't think, off the top of my head, I don't know. I know that the Melee Stats Discord, which we're both part of, probably has a definition for an EU major and another definition for an EU super major. But if they do, I'm not aware of it, and I don't know if HFLAN classes under that. But I'll just take it as my first, big offline win in a while.
Oh, yes, certainly. And it's helpful for you, I'm sure, to be able to say, I can go through this gambit of players in an open bracket, be able to handle the fact that it's a multi-day event, because I'm assuming it had to have been a multi-day event. It was streaming
Yeah,
Saturday and Sunday. So the entire experience, like, how would you sort of wrap it up after having gone through? You won from winners, if I recall correctly, all that fun stuff.
Yes. Well, it was super fun. We had one complaint, and it wasn't Swedish exclusive. It was actually almost every region from outside of Sweden had a single complaint about the event, which is sort of unfortunate because I think everything else except this was absolutely fantastic. There's very, very little to complain about. But the seeding was very interesting in that I know there's a really funny picture of a UK player, and it's a gravestone which says like, "Here lies all of the UK players that Lil Sheaf slayed in bracket," and it's just like, fuck, it's 7 or 8 names or something like that. It's pools, it's like half of the bracket, and it's just people from their region. And you see that, and then you look at like the amount of people from out of region they played, and I think there's like 2 or 3 people from out of region, and you're like, huh, that's a little bit weird. And another example was Fautenel and Renzo had to play, and they're both from like the same region. They play like every week, and they've played every week for like 4 years. So they have an insane record versus each other. So it was kind of unfortunate that they were projected to play in winners and did in fact play. And I had a less egregious one. However, there was a little bit of what we call a French bias in the seeding, I'll say. So I looked at the projected bracket, and I looked at the Swedish players, and I looked at their French opponents. One of them is from Netherlands. It was Charlon and Skullbro versus Abarv and Sharp. And I looked at their previous records and what my perception of their skill level was, and I was like, there's no way they beat the 2 Swedish players. There's 0 universes where this happens. And sure enough, Abarv Frios Charlon convincingly. And then I play Abarv. And then afterwards, Sharp Frios Skullbro fairly convincingly. And then I play Sharp. So my early bracket was Swede into top 8.
That is unfortunate that there were so many different players who were going, I want to come all the way to France just to play the same person. That is something that's like, it's one of the top 5 or top 10 list of things that seeders and TOs have to be very concerned about when they have such a big major where everybody's traveling from out of region to play.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate because the rest of the event was absolutely fantastic. There's almost nothing to complain about. I can't really think of anything except the time when, it caught on fire in the amphitheater, which was really funny. Someone dropped their phone in like the seam with the chair, and it's an amphitheater. It's like a huge projector. It's like a cinema, basically. You open the chair up, try and drag out the phone, and the phone snags. And then when the phone snags on someone, the person, because they were fishing it out with like the back of their hand, right? They weren't really like looking.
Right.
They just drag, and then they break the battery in half. And when they break the battery in half, the thing sort of just implodes and catches on fire. And then we have an electrical fire inside a chair, and everyone is kind of pretty confused. And that was at the very, very start of the event. They were going to hold like a welcome speech, like, welcome to HFLAN, to our great tournament. And then bam, catches on fire immediately, which was very funny. But outside of that, the event ran pretty well. I have very few complaints. So yeah, I had a super good time. Thankfully, no one got hurt except the phone. The phone is unfortunately unrecoverable.
R.I.P. R.I.P.
Yeah, but yeah, it was very interesting as a competitor in that I've been to the Smash World Tour qualifier, but that's a very different like experience than a open bracket, and that there were 32 players or something like. No, it was 16 players at Smash World Tour qualifier, and when there's only 16 players, they're all killers. Like you can fall at every step.
Invitational. Yep.
And it's also way shorter. You don't have to play for as long, and you can also just like take times to relax in between stuff, because every set is going to be competitive, so there's longer times between your stream matches. There's always good practice. Meanwhile, an open bracket is a little bit different. So I definitely felt that, in that I actually lost a game in my round one bracket. I lost one game in round one bracket, and I was like, oh, huh. And I free stocked them, but it was really funny that I didn't think I was gonna win the event when I lose round one. That's not typically what a dominant first seed is supposed to do. And then I win my round two fairly convincingly. My round three was a Abarv, which, fun fact, you might not have heard of them. They are a Swedish player, or he's a Swedish player who has been playing for a while, but hasn't really traveled to any events. And he popped out of nowhere for me. I ran into him on Unranked, and he messed my Fox up. He's a Marth main, and he just messed my Fox up. And I'm like, which Smurf is this? I refuse to believe that this is a player I've never heard of. Whose Smurf is this? And then I see the name again in like a net play bracket the week later, and he places like second, and I'm like, oh no, this is a real player. And then he just consistently places like top 8 or right outside top 8s in net play events, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess they're really solid. And now this is their first out of region real life event, I think, and they placed right outside top 8. I think they placed like 9th or something like that.
Hopefully encouraging for Abarv.
Yeah. And also, fun fact, he's the person I've been practicing Falcon Marth against the absolute most. So if you look at like the number of games I have in that matchup, and you like look at the Slippy tags, I think Abarv is at the very peak of that. So if there's one player who could have taken me out early, it's him, because he keeps it the most competitive, and he has the most practice versus me. But I managed to win. It was a free one, but it was pretty competitive. And then immediately after that, I play Sharp, who is from my local. We play every week. And usually I win super convincingly. However, not this time. It was the closest set of the event. It went to game 5 last hit, and it was extremely stressful, so much so that I gotten a sneak peek of one of the pictures a photographer took at the event that isn't public yet, and it's just me with the like, I'm leaning back in my chair praying and after my victory. And yeah, no, it was a good time. From there I was sort of like, okay, I'm entering top 8. I don't know how I'm gonna do. I'm a little bit stressed, but if there's one thing I know how to do, it's how to beat Fox, and it's how to beat Falco. And then the rest of the event was very, very convenient for me, because that was what I played against.
So you have characters that you would say you're probably more comfortable playing against, and one of the fun theories as we go into Smash World Tour season and Summit season is how Zane needs to have characters besides Fox and Falco in his bracket. Otherwise, it's kind of a wash. It's pretty easy for Zane. But when you think about having an ideal bracket, and yes, fellow Spaceys being in there, is it just you'll take it because that's what the bracket's giving you, and you're not going to think twice about having to quote unquote beat everybody? Or do you actually like the idea of, I did beat everybody, kind of like how it was for the same circuit finale?
Yeah, I super prefer just beating everyone. It feels so good to leave a tournament and say I sweeped and there was no bracket luck. There was no
Right.
like I dodged my hard matchup. There was this one I didn't really feel confident against. If I play all of my hard sets and win, that feels significantly better than winning without playing the hard sets. So definitely I'd rather just play like the hardest ones, which is why I'm very thankful that I went so close with Sharp as I did, because I think I kind of underrated that. And it was one of those things when you play someone at a local so frequently, you sort of just like get a little bit complacent. And that's not to say that I played like awful. I have one John, which was funny in that but it was fixed after game one. But the share that they were using, it was like super high up, which meant that I couldn't sit with my controller properly.
Yep.
I had to like sit like this and then play. And then we fixed that and it was fine. But yeah, I didn't expect to go that close. And I was very thankful because in retrospect, I think all of the other parts of the bracket would have been easier. So the fact that I got like the hardest one made me really happy in that regard. And in the same vein, when I looked at the finale, it was between Kinso and Professor Pro right before me in losers finals. And for those who don't know, I actually have a better record this year versus Professor Pro than I do versus Kinso. And because of that, I saw the like reverse Frio happening. And yeah, because Kinso was up 2-0, and then Prof like slowly brings it back, and it looks like Prof is going to win game 5. And I make the judgment that, I think Prof is going to win. And I actually got a little bit sad because I was really looking forward to the rematch versus who I thought would be the more challenging opponent at that time. And when Kinso won, I was actually so happy that like, yes, okay, I get the run back. It's going to be difficult. I'm going to have to like do new stuff. And then I won, and it felt super good.
It was insane watching that game 5. Like you were saying, how Kinzo was up, or sorry, Professor Pro was up, and I was like, okay, this is just sort of like the experience coming through. Professor Pro's been playing longer than Kinzo, but then Kinzo brings it back with like a 2-stock comeback, I think. And yes, that was very impressive to see. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Hopefully that means that, it'll generate a pretty good competitive grand finals. And you're just sort of like, well, yeah, but no. It was 3-1 though, right? It wasn't like a 3-0.
No, it was winners finals that was 3-1. Grands was 3-0.
Yeah.
So I'm very sorry to report that it was actually just as bad as you expected.
Ooh.
Kinso did tell me afterwards that he definitely felt like after Prof he sort of ran out of steam a little bit, which I completely respect.
Yep.
And I told him that this is actually like a little bit of a tangent, but I have a little bit of a pet theory that a reason that some players like make it way deeper into bracket so consistently is usually that like when you get used to getting to a point in bracket, you become very, very good at conserving your energy properly. So like if you're not used to entering top 8, you're not going to plan around top 8, and then you're going to run out of energy by then because you're trying to like use as much as possible. So when you get there, you're like, oh dang, I'm tired. I haven't like planned my food properly and all that. And then I sit there in grands, and meanwhile I've had a little bit more consistent top 8 placements recently. So I sit there and I'm completely prepared to play the finals. So it felt a little bit unfair in that regard, where it felt pretty clear that his level of play degraded a little bit. However, all of the games were competitive, and I definitely did sort of like there was 1 or 2 interactions away from losing any one of the games, which is sort of how you want it. It just swung in my way every time.
Well, I remember very clearly, mostly because it happened somewhat recently, but I remember very clearly the first time that I ever won a set in bracket. I went down to losers after losing in winners, and so I'm, looking at 0-2 again, which is fine because I don't practice enough to get emotionally invested in performing well or anything, but I won 2. And so I'm playing against somebody who I hadn't played before at the local, and so we get into it. I sneak out, I do mean sneak out game 1, and then that just was like I was able to ride that momentum to finish 3-0, and I was very excited. I was very happy. We were doing best of 3 early in bracket, by the way, because it was like a 10-person bracket anyway.
Best of 5, yeah.
And I was like walking around like, I did it. And then somebody was like, yo, Cypher, you gonna go over and you gotta get to that setup of your next match. I was like, oh, my next match.
I didn't expect to be here.
I know exactly what you mean when you're talking about planning for actually going the distance. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was sort of like very cool with a offline event. I also think one of the critiques I've had, even though I've benefited more than anyone from the like netplay circuit we've had in Europe, one of the critiques I and a lot of other players have had is that running a 3-day netplay event is way less fun and way more frustrating than running a like 3-day offline event.
Right, when you're
Because
actually around everyone.
it's impossible to find something to do between games because there's too much downtime, so you can't. But there's not enough downtime, so you can't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
So you sort of just sit in front of your computer for like 3 days, sitting like this, and you're like, okay, 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, I play my set, and then I wait between 20 to 50 minutes, depending on how the bracket/stream order goes. And then you just sit there and do that for 3 days, and it's a little bit frustrating. Meanwhile, at a real event, you have tons of people to talk to. You can just walk up to any random setup and sit down and play. And in general, the mood just lets you ride that high. And I've definitely missed that, but also I wasn't really used to it, so it was a little bit of a experience, especially like I noticed in winner semis versus Kinso, the crowd went crazy. There was so much noise during that set that I just heard it through my headphones. I was like, oh dang, I haven't been here in so long. And then I just had to like get back into the game and like focus, and all of that was very valuable. And it makes me super excited for like Summit and stuff to like hopefully be a little bit more, prepared for it compared to if I just had like netplay event, and then not a single like offline event.
When you think about Summit 11 and how there is only probably one other person who had a worse experience around Summit 11 and Zane, but I think number 2 is probably you, because you tried so hard to get there, doing everything that you possibly could. Those Twitlongers about your adventures in Mexico are just legendary, and how you, unfortunately, like at the end of it, are not able to get into the US. You're not able to go to Summit 11, and how heartbreaking that was. You're just like this close to being able to be part of such a great event and get that IRL experience back in. Like, as you think about that, and now you're thinking about Summit 12, what storyline do you put in your own head, or what's your mindset about how you're going to be able to take advantage of this? Because I know it means a lot to you.
So that's a very well phrased question in many ways. I would have chosen to answer it differently if you didn't add the second half to it, which I appreciate a lot, because you're gonna get a better answer than you would have gotten. So obviously I was very sad around the first one, but the feeling I've had, it went from sort of like sadness to a little bit of a like, not relief, but I managed to see like a silver lining, which is that there are certainly parts of both my play and my preparation and my mental state. I wouldn't say I was depressed, but I wasn't in the best mood. I was very stressed for various reasons, and I'm not nearly as stressed right now. And I also feel considerably more prepared in game for a variety of things. And those two things means that it's very easy for me to look at it and say, oh, that was a tragic trip. However, I have a funny story to talk about, and I have 2 summit invites, and I'm not a person who gives any regard to like a prize pot. Like that doesn't fuel me or motivate me in like any way. So if I missed the like $150,000 or whatever it was, the last one, and it's like considerably smaller this time, I don't mind, because the same players are gonna be there, and I'm gonna get the same level of gameplay, maybe even higher, because everyone is getting better constantly. So for me, I've got a very positive expectation for this one. I'm also very thankful because I was actually at Summit 9 as a coach for my good friend Prisant, because I was going over to Norway the week before, and Prisant decided on a whim to campaign because no European was campaigning, and it's like, I'll just do it. It's gonna be fun. We're gonna meme a little bit. It won't be that serious. And then he gets in, and
let's go.
I go along. It was a very fun trip for me. However, it was very visible, very clearly, like I could tell how much the pressure of like how much money and like how much people had spent on him to be there, and the collective like expectations from his friends and everyone around him that he would perform. And I could feel that pressure, and I pretty much concluded that if I can at any cost, I'm probably going to avoid campaigning for Summit, because I unfortunately have the exact same thing where I feel a lot of guilt over that stuff. So I probably wouldn't be able to have the mental state I should and like prepare in the way I should. So I'm very thankful that I can go now, both in just like a better life situation compared to in the summer, but also just that I don't have to go as a vote-in, but as a, qualifying player, because that means that there's really no expectation outside of what I put on myself. Like people are going to say, oh, I hope Europe, performs well, but everyone thankfully cheers for me usually at like events. I'm very thankful to have a huge group of people who like want me to succeed, and you in some ways you kind of learn to like tune that out, and that like you don't let that get to you. So I'm just expecting Summit to be a very, very fun and like rewarding event, but I'm also not putting any pressure on me to like succeed, because I feel like the stuff I've done over the last months either works or it doesn't, and it's like there's nothing I can do to change that. There's no attitude I can go in with where it's like, oh, if I think this way, I'm gonna place 4 spots higher and I'm gonna beat these 2 people that I wouldn't beat otherwise. There's no magic solution like that. So for me, it's much more important to just trust in what I've done over the months and go from there. And if I do well, then that's awesome. But if I do badly, then I'm going to be more prepared next summit. I'm going to get all the practice and, be back stronger. So no matter what, I feel like this is going to be a fantastic event for me, assuming I can get there.
Yes, so that's not necessarily a guarantee right now that you'll be at Summit 12. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, it should be a guarantee, because not a lot of people. I never did go into details. I thought it was obvious why I couldn't immediately go into the US last time. I might have mentioned it offhand in some part of the tweet longer, but at the time, Sweden hadn't rolled out their vaccination program for people my age. So I had to travel across the world unvaccinated. And that obviously comes with its own challenges in terms of like how you can cross the border and where you're allowed and stuff, and how you have to quarantine. And those challenges don't exist when you're double vaccinated, not nearly to the same degree. You have to fill in some forms, you have to take a test once you land, and you have to present like all your information, your vaccination proof and all that. But you don't have to quarantine for 2 weeks in Mexico, which hopefully means that I'm going to Summit. It's just that I did get a little bit of PTSD trauma from it. Every trip I've had since, it's just been a constant thought in my mind that, oh, how is this one going to go wrong? It's like my trip to London, it wasn't that long, and every step I was like, okay, so something is going to happen from this point to the point that I'm done. And then it didn't, and I'm like, oh, I made it. And then the same thing happened at HFLAN, but a little bit less severe. It's like I'm slowly unlearning it. But because of that, I'm a little bit anxious about the trip. But no, there really shouldn't be anything that, stops me. It should just be a trip there.
And then a trip back, and hopefully with really, really great results. When you were talking about the sort of the mentality of how you approach Summit 11 and now how you're approaching Summit 12, just it harkened back to how you described your play style as more of just like achieving a neutral state where you're able to do the things that you want to do, things that are, they feel reliable, and so you want to go do them. Yeah. It sort of seems to be that way in your mindset as well, that you don't like riding high highs. It's more of just finding something that can be as stable as possible.
So for me, I have a pretty strong belief that you have a set amount of mental energy per like tournament, per like set, and you can't really rely on playing extra good or coming up with something new creative. And by that I mean a lot of players, they go into a set feeling like they are the underdog. And when they go in feeling like they're the underdog, They feel like they have to prove that they deserve to win, and they have to like do all these things to like, they have to go the extra mile. And when you have that mentality, it's very easy to second guess yourself, and it's very easy to get stuck overthinking stuff. I've been a little bit critical of two other top players in Europe right now, who I believe mechanically and knowledge-wise are top class in Europe, but I think the results are dragged down by the fact that they often go into a set with me in particular, feeling like, oh, he's the better player. I have to do all these things. I have to be prepared for all of the stuff he's gonna do, and then they just have to think about it on the fly in the set. And the trend tends to be that our game ones are very competitive, and then our game twos are a little bit less competitive, and our game threes are even less competitive. And I feel like that sort of like symbolizes how if you feel like you have to like figure new stuff out, and you have to think about what you're doing and make sure that you're doing it correctly, then you run out of steam eventually. Whereas the way I want to think about the game mid-set, or rather mid-game, it's a little bit different between games and like on long breaks like the Angel platform. But during the game, I just want to believe that I know what to do. Like if either I know what to do or I don't know what to do. And if I know what to do, there's no point second guessing it. Sometimes I'm gonna mess up, and that just happens. There's no meaning to that. It's just a part of the experience. If I knew what I was supposed to do and tried to do it, but I messed up, you just have to accept that. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It's just part of being a human. And in the same way, if I don't know how to do something, then there's no point agonizing over it or trying to figure it out during the game, because you're not gonna get immediate results on the same level as what you've practiced like day in and day out before. So you end up sitting there, and I feel like there's no scenario where you like win there. I feel like no matter what, you're gonna end up just like performing worse. No, even if you like get the right thing, you're like, oh, this is what I have to do, and you think about it, and then you still don't do it because it's not something you practice, it's not in your muscle memory, and then you get frustrated, and from there, devolves. And yes, in that way, I think it's very possible to reach a stable mindset that just like works in losers and winners, regardless of pressure. It just works. Whereas I think a lot of players, they have a very momentum-based mindset where it's like, oh, I'm doing good. I just have to do this one more thing, and then I'm gonna, then I'm winning. Or I just have to do this, and like it's very much like even the way I'm describing it, it's very charged. It's very dependent on the situation. Whereas I think the way I think about the game, it's very convenient that no matter how the situation is going, I just kind of know how I should think about it, how I should frame it.
So what are you chasing when you play Melee? Because it's not the money thing, and it's almost as if you're not chasing an emotion. So, or how would you describe it?
So for me, I'm very fortunate in that I used to be a very results-based player. I used to look at the results and be like, dang, I got 13th this time. Oh, I really want to get top 8 next time. But what changed was that I started playing good players much more consistently, and I started getting enough game knowledge that I could start to innovate myself and draw my own conclusions and be confident in my conclusions, so that if someone says something else or like critiques them, I can like work that out how valid it is. And in that process, I caught a glimpse of what I think like the Melee I want to play looks like. And when I caught that glimpse, it's sort of like I just sort of started obsessing over it, where it's not about getting first. It's not about being number one in the world, as in like the ranking. It's about reaching that level of Melee that I think I can reach. And in doing so, I think all of that is going to come as like a byproduct. And I think that's very rewarding, because I can be happy with a loss if I think I played good and like was on the way to reach there, or I learned something new, or like all of these other things, and I don't have to attach it to like the end result in bracket. And it's also why I find it very funny how some players get frustrated when there's no like power rankings for a while. I've seen some discourse where it's like, oh, Europe hasn't had a power ranking for like 2 years. Why I'm ranked so low, I should be way higher now. And in my head, I haven't even really thought about it. I used to be like, oh, I'm ranked 19, next time I'm gonna be ranked 10, and next time I'm gonna be ranked 5, you know. But now it's just sort of like I play my game and I just feel very happy when I do. Like there's very few situations where I play Melee and I don't feel fulfilled doing it. In bracket or out of bracket, I just have a good time no matter what now. And it's super, super nice.
So you wouldn't describe it as chasing the perfect game so much as just chasing the Melee that you're trying to play, like on your terms.
Yeah, so everyone has a different idea of what they're like, what perfect play looks like, and we're not gonna agree. And I also think it's unrealistic to like always be a perfect play because we're humans, we're gonna mess up. So it's pretty stupid to, or not stupid, but it can be frustrating striving for it, especially if you do it in like a short term where you're like, I practice this, I know what this is supposed to look like, I miss it, and I'm like, dang, I didn't do the perfect Melee I wanted to, do. And you get mad, and then also perfect Melee is going to change when you get more experience. It's gonna not look the same in a year from now, in the same way that, but I think when you say perfect Melee, the definition of perfect is something that shouldn't be changed. It's set in stone. And while I think that what I'm reaching for could be described as my perfect Melee, I don't want to describe it as that because it's always changing. Every time I get some new information, every time I think about a new part of the game, a new interaction, or I get hit by something new, I always have one more thing to evaluate, and that changes how I want to play. And that's always going to happen. And I think if I let that process just keep happening, then eventually I'm going to be at like the point where I'm better than everyone else. However, I think if you stick to like an idealized version of Melee or of any game, of anything you do, once you reach that state, you're gonna be very empty. And I think that sort of happened with, I'm projecting here, I haven't talked to him about it, but I think that sort of happened with Armada, where when he became number one and cemented his legacy, there wasn't anything left to strive for. And I felt pretty frequently when I looked at him play that he didn't derive any enjoyment from it. It was a lot of just like routine. I'm doing this and then I'm winning and then I'm gonna win the next one because I should / I want to get the ranking. And it wasn't like playing for the game's sake, especially in the Puff matchup. It was super obvious there. He just seemed to play with like hate in his eyes the entire time.
Maybe this time Puff will finally be unselectable from the character select screen or something.
Exactly. And for me, I feel like I took a lesson away from that, which is just that, first of all, I don't think I need to have that mindset because I don't think that's inherently more productive than just striving for something that's more intrinsic. So I just prefer focusing on the intrinsic stuff that I enjoy about the game because I can derive enjoyment from playing anyone that's like even remotely competent. And it's also like every time I play someone new, I learn something, and then when I learn, I feel good about it. Whereas if all you're thinking about is placements, you're gonna throw away stuff. You're gonna be like, oh, I learned this, but it's not relevant to improving, or it's not relevant to immediately getting better results or anything like that. And I think you're more prone to like discarding stuff or judging stuff too harshly, being more close-minded. Whereas I've been very happy with how I think about the game. Just like I can't give like a here's how to get my mindset in 5 simple steps. Just do this. But it sort of just fell into place. I stopped being an angsty teenager. My life got a lot better, and then I realized that one of the few things that I like consistently enjoy, no matter what, is just playing the game. And I will keep enjoying playing the game, and I'm gonna keep enjoying getting better. And that shouldn't, as far as I know, stop when I become the best.
I love that mindset though, and yes, not always going to be easy to discern how to explain that to someone who's asking you, how do you get there or anything like that. Otherwise, there'd be a lot more, like within a year, somebody getting to either a really good mentality spot or skill in the game, like becoming a top ranked player and that sort of thing. So I think embracing the journey is probably the biggest thing you could say, just with the game or the life that you lead. And ultimately, Melee is just a part of one's life. It can be what you do 8 hours a day if you want it to, but it can also be something like, for me, since I have a wife and kids, I can't, and I work full time, I don't have time to do Melee on that level, but I choose to keep it in my life still, because every time I think about the game, or if I get to play it, if I get to play in tournament, it always brings me a certain amount of joy where I go, I don't get that from a whole lot else in life. So not that I hate everything else. It's just that Melee gives me something special when I play that. Yeah. Or when I talk about it.
And I think a lot of players lose that after a certain amount of time playing. I think they have that spark and then eventually they lose that. I actually saw that with who used to be number one in my region, discounting Leffen, of course, which was Dady. I had many discussions with Dady when I started getting good, where he talked about like, oh, I feel pressured to win because I'm, the first seed, and I feel like it's a lose-lose situation. Either I win and no one cares, or I lose and people like get hype at my misfortune and it just feels bad. And I get that, but I also think I've never felt that. I just feel like I have fun playing the game, and if someone is like enjoying beating me or whatever, I take that as like a huge compliment. Whatever I get popped off on, except I haven't been popped off by Hungry Box. I don't know if that one will feel special, but in general, when someone pops off on me, I just like, I feel kind of like warm inside. Like, dang, I was worth a pop off. And in general, just like, I always have fun doing it, despite being like the first seed and not being expected to drop a game. And it's about enjoying the journey for sure. I can shout out the one like good resource book for mentality that I think actually like consistently helps people. I've read a lot of them, but most of them I don't really enjoy. The one I recommend is just the mental game of poker, which I swear by, and I think this process started after I read a ton of mentality books, including that one, and sort of like evaluated what I want out of the game and why I'm getting frustrated. And that book really helps you like make that into like a concrete step by step rather than more of a like nebulous process.
You said a word that's super intelligent. I'm struggling to remember what nebulous means. Dang it.
It's vague. It's vague. It's hard to grasp. It's fleeting. Yes, nebulous just means that the opposite of concrete.
That's a good. Okay, there we go. That's a great way to think about it. Appreciate you helping me along, the English-speaking person. English is your second language, but I'm the one who needs help, and that's America for you.
No, it happens.
So moving into December, very busy season, and you could say that January is busy in the sense that Genesis is at the end of January, but this is about as heavy of a Smash week, like 8 days or 10 days, however you wanted to think of it. It's more for me. When it's Summit one weekend, and the very next weekend is the Smash World Tour, World Finals, 40 players that at the end of the last chance qualifier, there'll be 40 players all vying with each other to try to win the whole dang thing and win an impressive amount of money, or at least grassroots funded with all the sponsors and such. It's very impressive. And we could talk about the World Tour, perhaps I say World Tour, the Nintendo Circuit thing, perhaps another time. But this is going to be as big of a opportunity for people besides Summit, getting voted in or qualifying through places like Main Stage or otherwise. Like, there are people who are coming for either Summit, or they're just trying to be around the United States even up until Genesis, and they're like, we're just going to live here for a while, and we're going to do Smash World Tour, and we're going to do Genesis, and that all that kind of stuff is very exciting. Like players like Sora, who you had on your stream for a little while there. That was fun video to watch. on the YouTube afterwards, Pipsqueak. You don't have the Pipsqueak TV, by the way. I saw somebody else has Pipsqueak TV on YouTube.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I don't know why that is, but I have no idea how that happened. But yes, I managed to snag Pipsqueak, but I can't get Pipsqueak TV. So whatever. I'm not complaining. Usually it's the opposite way around.
But normally it's big enough of a deal to play Summit, and then you have like, a couple of weeks, or in Mango's case 5 or 6 months to recover from and not go to other stuff. But you have Smash World Tour the weekend right after that. So in your estimation, for the plans that you're loosely making, all that fun stuff, not that you have it down completely yet, but like, how are you going to manage this? Like, what are you thinking about heading into all of it?
You think I'm European and I don't have it all down already? It's so close. Of course I have it all planned out. No, I'm leaving on Sunday. So it's December 5th. So I'm getting a couple extra days to recover from jet lag before Summit. And that's very convenient because I've heard Leffen complain about jet lag enough times to realize that the best way to solve it is probably to just get there earlier and take his word for how bad it is. So I'm gonna get there and avoid jet lag, and then after Summit, I am heading over to Florida to share an Airbnb with the other European players, and then on, I think, Wednesday, we're moving over to the hotel that the BGBC crew, Smash World Tour crew, what's it called, has set up for the players. And then from there, event happens and we all have a good time. So I've got all of that planned out. However, it's going to be a bit of a journey in that I'm very unsure what my energy levels are going to be like. I've got a couple different pressing issues, medical and otherwise, where they might be hard to manage during that duration. However, I've also gone in with the only expectation of it being like a learning experience, which I talked about earlier, mentality.
Yep.
Which means I don't really feel too stressed about it because I don't really have like the guilt from, campaigning that comes with that. I just kind of feel like I'm going to have a good time no matter what. I have the advantage of having been at Summit once before, which means I know sort of what the layout is like. I know what to expect from the people, what sort of schedule it is. Even if I wasn't like actually involved in it, I did just like watch it and I did help Prison go through it. So I have that advantage, so I'm less stressed about that. I feel like if I didn't have that experience, I'd go into this going like, oh, it's Summit, oh, I'm gonna go to Summit, it's insane, I've never been here before, oh. Whereas now it's like, I know I'm gonna have a good time, but I'm not losing my mind over it because I have that prior experience, which is I'm very thankful for. And then going into the Smash World Tour, it's sort of, I think for me, I don't really mind whatever result I'm going to get there. Mostly, I've just been craving playing US players for so long because one of the hardest things about living in Europe is just how impossible it is to compare you to a US player. Because I'll be honest, when I look at most US players play, I think they look pretty bad. I think they look pretty incompetent in some stuff that European players have down. But it's impossible to prove that without playing them. And I want to like, a good example is when I look at SFAT play, I think he very actively trades like what's the correct thing to do for what's easier to do. And I think that's sort of why when I look at his play, that's how I justify the fact that he's been like top 10 for so long, but he's not like jumped up and, contested top 1, top 2, like the absolute peak. To me, that's a sign of just like foregoing the peak in favor of like consistency. And I want to see if I'm right on that. I want to see like, is there a secret to why he's so good? Is he actually like, do I just like have the advantage because I'm trying to push those peaks in game, and like that's just very, very exciting to me. Like, see how I'd stack up there. Like, does the experience beat me out, or does my like flow sharding and stuff, is it just like strong enough that I win anyways? And there's a ton of players like that where I look at them and it's very hard for me to know how I do relative to them. I'm very bad at judging like relative skill level. As long as you can move fast on the screen, I'm impressed pretty much. And then every time you do something I know is wrong, I'd get annoyed. I just sit there, I'm like, what are you doing? I know what to do here. But it's just gonna be a very pleasant experience, and I think I'm actually gonna come away from it with a decent perspective on it, because like, I mean, hell, I'm not top 100. I'm not, what's it called, top 50 in Europe, technically. I'm currently ranked 19, and I haven't played anyone in the US for like 3 years. Last time I went on a controller that wasn't modded, and then Genesis 5, which is the only US event I've ever been to, announced 2 weeks early that they weren't running UCF, so I didn't have shield drops and my controller couldn't dash back, and I lost at that event, and I was moderately annoyed. It's my villain backstory for why I switched to the box. I just wanted a controller that works in random situations like that. So it's gonna be fun to like actually get a good estimate of the US players, and because of that, I don't really feel like I have to handle it anyway, because I don't have like a set expectation. And because of that, it's just like, if I'm tired, I'm gonna just chill for like a couple of days. And if I feel like shit, I'm gonna, take a break instead of taking the opportunity to like practice. But if I feel good, I'm gonna seek out everyone and just play as many people as possible to get as good of an image as possible. That's all I really want out of it. I don't really care about anything else. I just want to get the experience.
I hope that you're able to get a lot of experience within that. It's such a short period
Yeah.
of time to do all that melee, and hopefully you're able to manage your energy levels and everything else like that, and then maybe perhaps have some kind of baseline of like, this is what I feel I can do when Genesis 8 comes around. Future, and either
I'm
American
not going
majors
to Genesis 8.
Huh?
I'm not going to Genesis 8,
You're not going
unfortunately.
to. I just assumed so hard there. So you're not going to Genesis 8?
Yeah, no worries. The reason is just because it's so close by, and I have to celebrate Christmas, and then it's just like the trip from it's like a 2.5 week trip to the US, and then immediately home, celebrate, catch up on stuff, and then immediately to Genesis afterwards. It's a little bit much, so I'm skipping out on that one. But I'm probably planning on going to whatever comes afterwards.
Yeah, the next whatever the next big thing is, which is interesting. Yeah. Can you think of what the next big one is? Because I can't, not off the top of my head.
Nope, nothing announced yet, as far as I know.
That's kind of okay. Melee off season historically, traditionally, tends to be the January to March time period, but you'd think that Pound or something would be, Because I think of Pound.
I mean, COVID.
Huh?
I mean, COVID.
Yes, but that didn't stop a bunch of people from announcing events for the past couple of months. Like, as in starting around June, we started to see some of that stuff come through. I have not
but
thought
they
about
announced them fairly close. They started announcing them closer to the event compared to normal. They used to be announced way earlier in advance. I feel like this year we've had a lot of ones.
Big House.
That are just like a month.
That's already been scheduled. October of next year.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I can't believe I forgot
that. That's far away though. I'm hopefully going to something before then. But yeah, no. So I'm very excited. For me again, it's just like it's such a weird experience in Mexico, because now I have these like 2 or 3 players that I've played against who consistently place well in net play brackets, and I just see their names. I'm like, have you gotten better? Or am I just like, if you place this well, then how well would I place? And it's sort of interesting experience there, where I have these like small pockets of information where I know I'm very good, but then I don't know how, like, it could just be like, nah, they were playing bad versus me, and they're actually way better, or like anything else. So I'm just super looking forward to it, because this past like 2 years, everyone in Europe has been like, nah, Europe still sucks, and like, if we've gotten this much better, then the US has to have gotten way better. And I look and I'm like, no, I actually think we caught up. Like, I don't think we're like there yet, but I think overall we went from like a weak region with a few standout players, like a handful, to a region where we have 10, 15 players who are like good, and then below that everyone is like more consistently moving up the ranks, and we're seeing faster change compared to like any time before Slippy. So I feel like I'm gonna be hopefully the bearer of good news. We'll see. I'm carrying the hope of every European. They're gonna be like, oh, Pipsqueak placed top 8 at Summit. That means that Europe is good. Finally, we can stop saying that Europe is bad.
They're already expecting Leffen to place better than that, even, and so it's like, well, we have to place secondary hopes. We have to play secondary hopes on Pip, because if he does well, that truly means it's not just Leffen is good. It also means Europe is good.
Yeah, I mean, we've discounted Leffen. Leffen is the antagonist here. Leffen's the one that's saying no one is good enough to practice with me. I don't feel like anyone is worth my time, and I don't blame him, knowing how good he is at the game. I know like there is a certain situation where if you beat someone the same way for 5 years straight and they don't change what they're doing, and you still beat them the exact same way 5 years later, I'd also probably get a little bit annoyed and stop. So I don't blame him, but it's still like, to the public, he's the enemy there. I don't think people are looking at Leffen going, Europe is so good, woo! Leffen plays top 3, I can't believe it. Europe's finally on the map.
So Leffen is his own continent.
Yeah, a little bit. He doesn't have the support. I think coming in as sort of like an unknown variable is very interesting there, where people don't know how good I am, and I don't mean that as like a bragging thing, like, oh, they don't know how good I am. I mean that as in, people have no clue, including myself. So it's going to be very interesting to see. And obviously, I think if there's one thing I'm lacking, it's experience. In that everyone talks about the US. Okay, so here's the secret insider knowledge from the people who have traveled to the US a bunch, which is people are bad in the US, but they're good in tournament, which is sort of the opposite from Europe, where it's like people are good in Europe, but they're bad in tournament. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be interesting.
Would you say it's just... No, come on. There's a lot of European events in the Slippy era that run on a fairly consistent basis.
Yes.
So that helps. However, that's the biggest thing for you?
No, I don't think that helps alleviate that, because the issue is that every time you travel to the US, you're playing such a huge pool of players in comparison, with such a completely separate culture. The culture of gameplay in Europe is much more homogenized towards like pushing the advantage of your character to the absolute limit, that everyone sort of everyone copies each other. They see what's successful, they copy what's successful, because there's a much larger variety of playstyles that became successful in the US. There's also a much larger variety of players at a lower level, and it goes like, no matter how far you scale down, everyone just has more variety. So you're going to go to the US and you're not going to see S to J and then S to J, but a little bit different, and then S to J, but even more different, but it's like still sort of S to J. You're going to see non-Wizzy and S to J, and they're going to be 3 completely different players with completely different habits, with completely different ways to look at the game and evaluate what they think is important. Whereas in the US, I've already realized, in EU, I've already realized that ever since I got good, I feel like every Fox has looked at me in EU and said, oh, I know what he's doing. I'm just going to copy this and then I'm going to beat him. And so far, no one's been able to do it better than me. But I mean, that could change. But it still means that when I play Prof and when I play Nikki and when I play like Rix, when I play like Ice to a lesser extent, but more so now than before, I'm playing sort of the same player in a lot of ways, where it's just like everyone has a similar evaluation and I just need to do the same thing. I'm not getting surprised by new stuff. And in that way, I feel like Europeans lack the tournament experience, because as soon as you go over, it's just culture shock after culture shock after culture shock. So it'll be interesting. It'll be cool. I hope I can avoid that by just being better than everyone.
Yet another reason why Melee is amazing. Not only do Europeans travel over to the US and have, a certain amount of culture shock, because the US does things slightly different than most European countries, but it's also within the game itself that there's even within a game like Melee, the blessed party game that it is, you can have such a different culture of how you play characters.
Yeah, it's super cool. I think one thing that surprised me the most was just like, I've talked to a few US top players that I considered like labbers or like labber adjacent, and then I'd like talk to them, I'm like, oh, never mind. I was comparing you to the true EU labbers, and I set wrong expectations. That's okay, but now I need to readjust. And yeah, it's interesting how like different the culture there is. I mean, I never grew up hearing the term mind games uttered unironically as a skill to have. But I hear from various US players that back in the day, it was all about the mind games. It's like, oh, Asen has the mind games. Oh, Shilin has the mind games. Hugs, not a good player, but the mind games carry so hard. And I'm just like, I'm the opposite. I'm just like, melee to a degree is like poker. It's you can stack your hand insanely in your favor if you're card counting, and you can make it so that no matter how good your mind games are, if I have to mind game you once and you have to mind game me 35 times, the odds are gonna stack up in my favor. So that's sort of how I look at the game, and so far it's worked, but we'll see. Maybe Mango or someone will just mind game me 800 times in a row, and I'm gonna be in the infinite Tsukiyomi. If you have any anime references, it might be too young for you. But yeah, I'll be in the illusion, just getting wobbled and just mentally not sure what I'm doing, just looking around like, what's happening? Why am I losing?
Wobbling's illegal over here too. The only person that I remember in a Hungrybox pop-off is actually the SFAT set where they're both standing up and Hungrybox wins, pops off, and this is what SFAT is doing afterwards. He's like, nodding vigorously, like a hand on his head, like, "Yep, I just lost. This sucks." And Hungrybox is like next to him, just still like bouncing around. When you play against Hungrybox, when if you play against Hungrybox, if a pop-up happens to happen, I don't think you need to really worry about what people are going to say about what is happening to you in that moment. People just look at what Hungrybox is doing because that's where the show is.
No, for me, I've been wanting to see what that pop-off is like in close quarters, and I need to feel the energy. And if I'm on the other side, I'm probably not even gonna think about the fact I lost. As soon as I realize he's doing the pop-off, I'm just gonna observe. I'm just gonna see what I can learn from this. Like, how can I pop off like Hungrybox? Like ask myself the important questions. So yeah, no, I totally get that. I look forward to it. I think one thing that I definitely gained from this like wait from Summit 11 to now is that I committed to switching to Captain Falcon versus Marth, and if I went to the Summit 11, there was no way that counter pick was like even remotely prepared. But now I spent a couple months just like playing that matchup a lot, and now I feel a lot more confident in bringing it out. And even if I lose, I'm gonna get so much more than if I bring out like a first month counter pick versus like Sane or Kodorin, and then it's a completely different character the month after. Like I'm not getting very useful information from there.
It's great. So there's two Moths now because Kodorin was at the previous summit because you weren't there, but he wouldn't have been there if you were there, and it just would have been Zane. And who wants to try a month-old counter pick against Zane in bracket or even in friendlies? Like you're just not going to do it.
Exactly. So yeah, well, I would do it, but I would expect to lose. Like I wouldn't go in saying like, oh, this is the correct way to get a victory. I'd go in saying this is how I get experience and go from there. But I would still play the Falcon in bracket.
Wow, that is impressive.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever switched back to Fox a single time in bracket, even when I'm like down or lost games or stuff like that. I've always played Falcon every game.
That's a good way to that's a healthy way to stick through the whole thing, because you could lean further into counterpick wars and just switch characters every game. There are players who do that, but it's dangerous territory. Like just trying to like reset your mindset going from character to character from each game. It's so tricky to play two different characters in high level melee.
I just prefer sticking to it, and if I lose, then every game is valuable, and I was like in it to perform as best I can with it, rather than in some ways it might make sense. Like there might be some stage that Fox does like equally well as Falcon in, and I'm just like, okay, I could play Fox here and it'd be fine because I'm more experienced with Fox, but I could also play Falcon, and then I learn so much more, and the next time I'm going to come back stronger, and I'm going to have gained so much more from that. So I just prefer doing it that way.
Great mindset. I think that's perfect for dual maining and having a, well, as of right now, Martha's the only character you would use Falcon against. So having a counterpick matchup character and just sticking to it as compared to, it is tough because you want to win. And if you focus on that too much, you're going to go, I got to play Fox.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've definitely felt the call of the void at certain points. I didn't mention it, but the person I lost against in round 1 winners at HFLAN was a Marth main. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, dang. I could just auto win this if I go Fox. And I felt the call of the void. I was like, am I going to break it? Am I going to do it? Is this the time I break the streak? And I was like, nah. I'm just going to win with Falcon. And if I lose, it's a really funny result. Then we're going to look at the bracket and they're going to be like, how did Pipsqueak get seeded first and end up in losers round 1? What happened? And then I just go on a tear from losers and it'd be great. But no, I stuck with it and then I free stocked in game 3. And it's the classic, like, I just prefer, if I lose, then at least I stuck to it, you know?
Yes. The last question here, I need to get this in because I broke a promise in another video or another podcast that I've recorded. So I need to keep the promise by using audio from someone who enjoys Fox and someone who you're going to agree with by hearing this question. But I'm going to play it on my phone here and hopefully you can hear the audio. And if you can't, I will recap it for you.
Cool. I'm ready.
Well, everyone that's watching this, actually. What is the best Fox alt color? Or just Fox skin color? I think it is Blue Fox. And, well, of course, that's the only, correct option. But unless you guys have a different opinion, love to hear it. And that's all I wanted to come on here and say. Thank you for listening. And I would love to hear your replies. Bye-bye.
So that's a question from
I heard
Fire.
Everything.
Shout outs to, well, this is not Firepuff 12. This is OG Kid.
Oh.
This is Fire who rated his stream or something to that effect, and he's like,
oh, it's that kid.
Yes.
I love that. That's so blessed.
Yes,
that's incredibly blessed. I love that.
He was on my podcast, and then he says to me, "Can I submit a question?" I was like, "Sure, you can submit a question." So he says he's asking the question of who's got the best alt for Fox. Is it blue? Is it red? Is it neutral? Is it green? And he says it's blue. I think I know the answer for you, but I will let you kick us off here. What's the best alt Fox color?
So first of all, I just want to hit you with with the fact that this is a very sartorial question right here. A word I learned earlier today, and I just had to get it in there right away in the most natural way possible.
Let's go.
But yeah, let's go. No, for everyone who doesn't know what that means, aka 99.8% of people on Earth, it means having to do with clothes and clothing. And I have some thoughts on alt colors, in that I think I have decently strong opinions. For me, I've always felt that the green color stands out as the one I dislike the most, and for the most part, it has to do with the shoes. I think they're kind of frustrating to look at. Like, I look at they're like, I feel like someone turned the saturation up by like twice as high as they should be.
There's no red like that in his red costume.
Yeah, exactly. Like the red one is just like very pale orange, but the red boots, they just pump the saturation up so high that I can't look at the character. I can only see the boots, and the rest of the character just like fades into the background, and it's really annoying. And it also just it's just a frustrating thing to look at. And for me, the only thing I really care about in alts is like, do I want to stare at this for thousands and thousands of hours of my life? And I decided that no, not green. So green is the one I will discount immediately and say, I don't like that one. And now for the opposite reason, completely other side of the spectrum, orange. Why is everything the same color? Why is every part of that costume just like a slight variation in color? There's no contrast whatsoever. And because there's no contrast, I don't think it's offensive. I think the green one can, after a while, get just like a little bit offensive to look at. But the orange one, it's just so whatever to me. I just don't think about it at all, and it doesn't like stand out. So that one I think is pretty bad for the complete opposite reason. And then we have the two finalists, the blue and the default. And for me, I think blue stands out just enough. However, I think it loses out a little bit with contrast, where I really like the colors, but lavender, you can call it blue or lavender. I guess it's technically lavender color, but the lavender fox, it also has the issue that orange has, where everything feels like it's sort of the same color. There's very little contrast. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the main reason I prefer default over blue. However, people who follow me know that I've had periods where I've decided to switch color to purple, and then after a couple months I've switched back to default, and then after a couple months I've switched back to purple. So I sort of bounce between them, but I think default overall I've spent more time on, and I think it just has a cleaner look. It's the only one that has any form of contrast. They did this way better in the following games. In Brawl and in Smash 4 and in Ultimate, they fixed that, and they've realized that the like under jacket that the character has, and the like, well, I guess it doesn't have the scarf in the later games in the same way, but the under jacket, it stands out relative to his like outer jacket, and it looks really good in like every alt. So it's super unfortunate that they decided to not do that in the earlier games, because I feel like if you change the color of like the orange like undershirt that's just like pale like brown, if you change that to be a little bit more vibrant, then that color scheme would be so good. And in the same vein, if you change lavender, so you have like, because right now everything is sort of the same intensity. If you have like super dark undershirts, it's like almost black, or you have like another color contrast with it at all, then I think it'd look a lot better. Obviously the default skin, they didn't have to do any of that, because that one they just took over from the actual games. Yes. Where, you know, probably another designer thought about what color scheme to use, and they thought that, oh, these two colors fit together nicely, so it just feels more natural.
Okay, so you're saying a lot of great things. Here's what I'll add to the discussion. The color of Fox's fur in Melee makes it so hard to actually get a lot of good costumes out, because it's not really a neutral color. It's almost like an orange, almost. It's like getting close. Yes. And so it's going to be hard to find a lot of good color combinations where you say, this makes sense. Most of it, you're just going like, what were they thinking? Like, especially for blue and the red. I mean, we're saying red, but it's really hard. Yeah. And yellow boots, which I'm just like offended by. So when I think about green as being my favorite, the main reason why I say that is because it's almost as if I enjoy that chaotic perspective of they really just leaned into it. I like green. It's my favorite color after black. You know, when people tell you can't say black is your favorite color, it's not a color. So then I say green. All that to say,
I see.
I enjoy the red boots because it makes me think about a scene from The Good Place, which is where, you know what, I'm not going to get into it. But the people who remember The Good Place and remember that scene, they'll remember it. They'll think it's funny. I love the red boots. I love the ridiculousness of them, how they're basically the only thing you can look at after a while. And because he's wearing a green jacket, I'm like, I can't really look at the blue. I can't really look at the orange. And I've never liked the alt for Falco or Fox, the default, excuse me. I never liked the default for Fox or Falco. So for Falco, I played the green Falco, and then for Fox, it's the same thing. And it's not like it's one that I feel super awesome about, but what I would want to change is the color of Fox's fur to be like slightly towards that more neutral brown that he ends up being in the later games, so that colors can work better on him. I think that's the big thing.
I think there's an alternate solution, which I'm really sad they didn't do. And I know that Fire isn't going to like this, because I'm suggesting something that, given what his favorite is going to sound really rude. It's that it's a well-known fact that orange and blue goes super, super well together. They're the perfect contrasting color, and every single movie poster has these two colors together.
Yes.
So just change the blue color alt into actually blue. Like, I think the like turquoise, I think the bright like the bright like I can't pronounce it, azure blue.
Azure. Oh my goodness, you're saying so many intelligent words today, Pip. Woohoo.
Yeah, true. But yeah, that type of color scheme I think looks so good with how extreme his fur is, you know.
Yes.
However, it would be an easier solution to just make his like fur more neutral, because that would mean more colors work.
Yes, the moist fox for Moki. That's a great combination. And with like the black, like the black as well mixed in is like, I really wish that was just Melee.
My two favorite skins are both ones that I could see as like real skins. One of them is just turquoise jacket. That one looks so good. And then the other one is it's the vaporwave one, where it's like it's slightly pink. And I think the slight dampened pink color works super well with the fur as well. And those two are just like my favorites. And I get very sad because, in my opinion, the pink one is just a slightly better default color scheme. It has a redder scarf and it has like a pink jacket and it fits perfectly. It's a very slight pink. It's like almost white, but not quite. And then the turquoise one, it just stands out and looks so good. So yeah, I'd remove blue or I'd change lavender into blue, I'd change default into the vaporwave outfit or whatever it was called.
Are there any esports organizations that can come to you, Pip, that have those color schemes where they go, all we gotta do is find somebody like Vancity Primal or one of the many gifted modders and artists in this Melee community to get you one of our esports like symbol and colors onto the Fox character for you, and it'll be turquoise or vaporwave pink. That would be awesome, because you're a free agent. So to finish us out, you can tell the people where they can find you, and also whatever you want to say to the effect of, somebody throw me money to play this game if you want to do that, because you are a free agent. And it would be, I think, especially after December comes through and rolls around with all the stuff, it would be awesome for you to play to that point where, yes, people are watching, organizations are watching, and they're going, that's our next player.
Yeah. So for me, you can find me at Pipsqueak_TV in most places, Twitter and Twitch, and then it's just Pipsqueak on YouTube. I am a chronic Twitter user, so be aware, there are too many tweets there. I will flood your timeline. Now, for giving me money, I actually have a very blessed situation in that I live in Sweden, and I also have I have two medical conditions, one of which is ADHD, or neurological, I don't remember what they're called, but yeah, I have two diagnoses there. One is ADHD, the other one is atypical autism, both of which qualify me for some very generous like government support, which means that aside from like the work I do outside of Melee, like I can still survive decently, and it's not like I'm not in need of emergency funds. And I'm very clear that the one thing I hate more than anything else is when people spend money on me that they cannot afford to spend. There's nothing that ruins my day more than hearing that someone spent money on me and then they couldn't afford something, or they forgoed like a luxury they were looking forward to or anything like that. So I'm gonna do the opposite and say, don't throw money at me unless you like genuinely want to and it doesn't affect your like day-to-day quality of life at all. And yeah, that is pretty much all I have to say there. I stream more and more regularly on Twitch. It's been periods with medication where it hasn't worked out, and I've had very low energy in the past couple of months, but that seems to have worked out, which means that my stream schedule is getting healthier and healthier and more frequent. So after I'm back from Summit and SWT, we can assume that unless that trip absolutely destroys me, I'm probably going to be very active on Twitch and stuff. So if you want to follow me there, that'd be dope. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say.
Pep, thank you so much for joining me on Bottom of Smash Mountain. I forgot to do this at the beginning, so for myself, for people who want to support me financially, or if they just want to take a look at how painstakingly, aka I spent like 60 minutes on this, my Patreon, patreon.com/BSMpod. You can do that if you want to. Disposable income only. I liked what you said, Pip. And I think for an esport organization, they would have so much to gain from signing a player like you, just because you are taking a wider view of how the game works and how much you have to learn still. You have a great mentality behind it. So I would love to see that happen at some point for you. As in the meantime, though, yes, all the links to Pipsqueak _TV for Twitch and Twitter, regular Pipsqueak for YouTube, you will find those in the description of the podcast / YouTube video that you're watching. Really appreciate your time, Pip. Thank you for joining me.
No, it's been fantastic. Thank you for having me. I've had an amazing time, and I guess, we're signing off now. Thank you for having me.
I mean, yes, more or less. We're going to do something. We're going to do the thumbnail after we're done recording officially. But yes, let's sign off kind of for now.
Yeah, yeah, sign off. I don't know what that means, but yeah, sure.
Nobody's actually hung up on me yet, so that's the good part.
Sorry,
you did hang up on me.
Sorry, there's a primal urge. As soon as you said that, there was an absolute primal urge to do that to you, and I am obviously, if I was sorry, I wouldn't have done it, but I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just got popped off on, basically.
Well, you set yourself up for it.
Yes,
you
exactly.
did set yourself up for it. Yeah.